The stillness in the Los Angeles penthouse was so dense that Aisha Thompson could hear her heartbeat pounding. She sat at the edge of the bed, her eyes fixed on the space where James Carter, her husband, was supposed to be lying. Tonight marked the 730th consecutive night he had found an excuse to sleep at the office, work late meetings, important deals. Like sharp blades, those words had slowly sliced apart everything beautiful between them. Where are you reading this story from? A quiet coffee shop on a morning train, or in the warmth of your room? Leave a comment and share your first impression of Aisha. What about her sparks your curiosity? Aisha, a talented African-American journalist, was once the center of attention in bold, incisive articles about social justice. But now, in this luxurious apartment, she felt like a ghost. The penthouse, adorned with paintings worth more than a car and shimmering furniture, symbolized success built by James, an ambitious white businessman. But to Aisha, it was nothing more than a gilded prison where she faced her loneliness night after night. She pulled her silk nightgown tighter around herself and walked to the enormous window overlooking the city lights. Los Angeles never slept, but in Aisha's heart, everything had frozen. She remembered the early days of meeting James when he held her hand in the movie theater, his green eyes glowing as if she were the only miracle in the world. Now he rarely looked at her, as if she were just another expensive decoration in his perfect home. "Why, James?" she whispered, her breath fogging the glass. That question haunted her. Was it because she was no longer attractive enough? No, Aisha knew that wasn't true. She jogged every morning and could see dresses that complemented her glowing brown skin. So why? She recalled a company party when one of James's colleagues looked at her with disdain and whispered about how a girl like her didn't belong in their world. Could it be the pressure from society, from James's conservative family, that drove him to push her away? She pressed her forehead against the cold glass, trying to hide the tears. 2 years of marriage, 730 days, but the truly intimate moments between them could be counted on one hand. Not just physical closeness, but late-night conversations, shared dreams, or simply the comfort of sleeping beside each other. All of it had vanished, leaving Aisha with one unanswered question. Was their love still worth saving? The bedroom door burst open, slicing through Aisha Thompson's thoughts like a blade. James Carter stepped inside, his deep blue suit, still immaculate despite the late hour, his brown hair perfectly styled. His emerald green eyes, once enough to make Aisha's heart flutter, now looked tired and distant. He glanced at her as if she were simply part of the room, another expensive piece of furniture in their lavish penthouse. Have you ever felt someone close suddenly become a stranger? Share that moment in the comments. Does your feeling mirror Aisha's right now? Aisha stood up, pulling her silk nightgown tighter, her voice soft but sharp. "You still remember your way back here, James?" He paused, hand midway through loosening his tie, but didn't turn around. "I'm tired, Aisha," he said, his voice low and dry, as if that were his only explanation, after 730 nights of leaving her alone. Tired, Aisha stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "This is my bedroom too, James. This is my home too." This time, he turned, a flicker of pain flashing in his eyes, as if he wanted to say something, but the words were stuck in his throat. Then just as quickly the flicker vanished, replaced by a blank, unreadable expression. "I know," he said, removing his jacket, as if the conversation were over. A surge of anger flared inside Aisha, but behind it was something more profound: pain. She remembered the early days when James used to call her during lunch breaks to hear her voice, when he held her hand in the movie theater and whispered that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Now he didn't even bother to look at her. "Am I not good enough anymore?" she whispered, even though she knew it wasn't true. She jogged every morning and chose dresses that celebrated her radiant brown skin. She was still Aisha Thompson, the journalist who once silenced an entire newsroom with an article on social injustice. But James didn't answer. He walked into the bathroom, leaving Aisha in suffocating silence. She sat down at the edge of the bed, clutching the silk sheet in her hands. A painful memory surfaced: a company party from a year ago, when one of James's business associates looked at her with contempt and whispered to someone nearby, "She doesn't belong here, does she?" James had heard it, but he only pulled her away without saying a word in her defense. Was that when he started to drift away? Was it the pressure from his conservative family, who had never accepted a black woman as his wife, that made him let go? Aisha stared at the space on the bed where James should have been. 2 years of marriage, but the moments of closeness, midnight talks, shared dreams, could be counted on one hand. She couldn't live like this, like a ghost in her own home. But what was keeping James there? What made him look at her with eyes filled with both sorrow and detachment? That question, like a knife, made her heart bleed. Morning sunlight streamed into the marble-tiled kitchen, but in Aisha Thompson's heart, everything felt as cold as winter. She sat by the kitchen counter, a cup of cold coffee in her hand, watching James Carter scroll through his phone over breakfast. He wore a perfectly tailored gray suit, ready for yet another day of avoiding her. 2 years living like strangers. 2 years waiting for an explanation that never came. Aisha knew she couldn't keep doing this. Yesterday she had called a divorce lawyer. Today she would tell James. Have you ever stood before a life-changing decision? What did it feel like? Share your moment in the comments. Do you think Aisha is doing the right thing? Aisha took a deep breath, her heart pounding, as if it might explode. James, she said, her voice calm, but razor sharp. He looked up from his phone, looking at her for the first time in weeks. I called a divorce lawyer yesterday. Diana Martinez, the one who helped my friend Sarah last year. James's hand froze, his fork trembling midway to his mouth. His emerald eyes widened like someone had doused him in ice water. What he asked, voice cracking. I'm serious, James. Aisha continued, keeping her voice steady, though her heart raced. I want a marriage, not this kind of existence. If we don't have a marriage, maybe divorce is the answer. James put the fork down, his expression flickering between shock and fear. Aisha, you can't be serious, he said, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. She gave a dry, humorless laugh. When was the last time you kissed me, James? When was the last time you said you loved me? When was the last time you remembered you had a wife? He opened his mouth, then closed it again, as if searching for an answer he knew he didn't have. Aisha stood up, walking to the window that overlooked their private garden. White rose bushes swayed in the breeze, beautiful but cold, just like their marriage. I can't live like this anymore, she said, her voice low but firm. I won't live like this anymore. James stood, stepping toward her, but stopped short, as if an invisible wall stood between them. We have everything, Aisha, he said, his voice nearly pleading. This house, the money, a good life. Aisha turned to him, her eyes blazing. We have nothing, James. Yes, we have a house. Yes, we have money. But we don't have love. We don't have friendship. We don't even have a decent conversation anymore. He ran a hand through his brown hair, messing it for the first time in Aisha's memory. Where will you go? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Chicago, she replied. Maya said I could stay with her until I figure things out. Chicago. James repeated as if he couldn't believe it. Aisha, please don't do this. We can work this out. Work it out, how she asked, her voice rising, full of challenge. When you won't even tell me what's going on. When you treat me like a stranger living in your house. Could you give me one reason, James? One reason to stay. He looked at her, eyes filled with pain, as if he wanted to say something, but then he turned away. "I have a meeting this morning," he said, voice dry, and left the kitchen. Aisha stood there watching his back retreat. She remembered a painful moment from the previous year at one of James's company parties. A colleague had whispered to someone else, "She doesn't fit with him, does she?" His gaze of judgment aimed at her brown skin. James had heard it, but all he did was pull her away from the crowd, saying nothing in her defense. Was it his silence, the pressure from his conservative family, that built the wall between them? She picked up her phone and called her sister Maya. "It's me," she said, when Maya answered. "I told James. I'm coming to Chicago." There was a pause on the other end, and Maya replied, "Good for you, Aisha. Come. The kids and I are waiting." Aisha hung up and looked out at the garden one last time. She would give James 2 weeks to decide, 2 weeks to choose her, to choose their marriage, or to let her walk away forever. Aisha Thompson stood in James Carter's office, the sunlight from the window casting a glow across the walnut desk where everything was arranged perfectly, except for one small, weathered wooden box, sitting askew like a secret poorly hidden. She had come to collect a few documents before leaving Los Angeles for Chicago, but that box, with its faint engravings, made her pause. Her heart pounded, as if sensing that whatever was inside might change everything. Have you ever encountered a secret that changed how you viewed someone? Share your story in the comments. What do you think Aisha will find in this box? Aisha knew she shouldn't open it. James's private space was where he retreated to night after night to avoid her. But curiosity mingled with the pain of 730 lonely nights overpowered reason. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the lid and opened the box. Inside was a stack of letters, the envelopes yellowed with time. Her name, Aisha, written in James's familiar handwriting. Her heart felt like it stopped. He had written her these letters, but never sent them. She opened the first letter, dated 6 months after their wedding. "My dearest Aisha," the writing began. "I watched you sleep last night and wondered how I got so lucky. You are the best thing that's ever happened to me. But I'm scared. I'm scared I'll ruin everything the way my father ruined our family. I love you so much, and that terrifies me." Aisha felt her breath catch. James loved her. Then why had he pushed her away? The second letter, written a year ago, was even more heartbreaking. "You think I don't want you, but that's false. I ache to be close to you, but every time I try to touch you, I remember my father. He used to be sweet to my mother, and then rage would turn him into a monster. I remember the night he smashed a bottle in front of me when I was just 8 years old because my mom dared to argue back. I can't let our love become that, Aisha. I'd rather die than hurt you." Tears streamed down Aisha's cheeks as she kept reading. The most recent letter, written just a week ago, pierced her heart like a knife. "I see you're thinking about leaving. Maybe you should. You deserve someone who isn't broken like me and can love you without fear. But I'm selfish, Aisha. I can't imagine life without you. You're my only light." Aisha sank into James's chair, clutching the letters as she sobbed. All those months, she believed he no longer loved her, that she wasn't good enough, that pressure from his conservative family or the judgmental stares of his colleagues had pushed him away. It was all wrong. James loved her so much that fear had imprisoned him. He was afraid of becoming his father, a white man raised in a household steeped in violence, where love was twisted into control and pain. She remembered the one time James had ever mentioned his father, a fleeting comment about how he used to hit his mother while drunk before the divorce. Aisha had wanted to ask more, but James quickly changed the subject. Through these letters, she understood that memory wasn't just a distant story, but a deep scar shaping how he loved her. But was this understanding enough to save their marriage? Or was it simply an explanation for wounds too deep to mend? Wiping her tears, Aisha carefully placed the letters back into the box. She would still go to Chicago, but now the journey wasn't just about escape. It was a chance for James to confront his fear, and for her to decide whether she could keep loving a man haunted by the past. As she left the office, the light from the window fell across the wooden box, as if it still held a piece of James's heart waiting to be set free. The flight to Chicago lasted 3 hours, but it felt like an eternity for Aisha Thompson. She sat by the airplane window, eyes fixed on the white clouds, but her mind remained trapped in the Los Angeles penthouse with James Carter's letters. Those words of love, interwoven with fear. She had left him with 2 weeks to decide, but would he be brave enough to confront his past and choose her? Or was she flying toward a future without James? Have you ever walked away from someone to rediscover yourself? What did it feel like? Share your experience in the comments. What do you think Aisha is hoping for in Chicago? When the plane landed, Aisha saw her sister Maya waiting at the gate with her 2 kids, Ella and Noah. Ella, the radiant 7-year-old, ran up and hugged her. "Auntie Aisha, Mom said you're staying with us." Noah, more reserved, gave her a gentle hug, but his eyes seemed to recognize the sadness in his aunt. "Are you sad?" he asked. Aisha smiled, trying to hide it. "Just a little, but seeing you two makes me feel much better." Maya, a sharp-eyed therapist, embraced Aisha tightly. "You're stronger than you think," she said as they left the airport. While the kids were playing games on their phones in the car, Maya leaned in and asked quietly, "What happened?" "You told James about the lawyer, right?" Aisha nodded, recounting the conversation in the kitchen, and when she discovered the letters. She described James's fear, his memory of his father smashing a wine bottle in front of him when he was just 8, and the times he had hit James's mother while drunk. Maya listened, then said, "James grew up in a conservative white family where love was twisted into control and violence. His fear isn't just about his father, it's about believing he inherited that gene. But you're not his mother, and he's not his father." Aisha nodded, but her heart remained tangled. "You're right, but what if he can't move past that fear? I've waited 2 years, Maya. I'm tired." That night in Maya's cozy apartment in Chicago, Aisha lay on the sofa, listening to Ella and Noah's laughter from the other room. The liveliness of her sister's home reminded her of the days she and James had once dreamed of building a family, those evenings cooking together, children running through the house. But that dream had dissolved, replaced by lonely nights in a cold penthouse. She picked up her phone and looked at their wedding photos. In his tuxedo, James looked at her like she was his entire universe. Did that man still exist? Her phone buzzed. James's name flashed on the screen. Aisha hesitated, her heart pounding. She answered cautiously, "Hello." On the other end, James's voice was raspy, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Aisha, it's me. I just wanted to hear your voice." She said nothing, waiting. After a long pause, he continued, "I know you found the letters. I never meant for you to see them. But now you know. You know what I'm afraid of." Aisha gripped the phone, her heart torn between hope and doubt. "James, why didn't you tell me? You let me believe you didn't love me for 2 years." His voice trembled. "I wanted to tell you, but every time I tried, I saw my father. I remember the night he hit my mom in our family restaurant in front of everyone. I was only 10, Aisha. I stood there helpless and swore I'd never become him. But what if a part of him is in me?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she kept her voice steady. "James, you're not your father, but you're hurting me by running away. You must face that fear to save this marriage for yourself and us." He was silent, then said, "I know. I'm trying. I just need time." Aisha took a deep breath. You have 2 weeks, James. I'll wait, but not forever. After hanging up, Aisha sat in the darkness, listening to the bustling sounds of Chicago outside the window. James's call was a flicker of hope and a reminder that the road ahead would not be easy. She recalled a moment at one of James's company parties when a colleague had looked at her with judgment and whispered that she didn't belong in his world. James had remained silent, offering no defense. Could he learn to stand up for her for their love? She hugged a pillow to her chest, determined to give him one last chance and ready to face a future without him. Aisha Thompson stepped off the plane in Los Angeles, her heart heavy with hope and apprehension. 2 weeks in Chicago had given her space to breathe, to remember who she was. But now she was returning to the penthouse, where James Carter was waiting, or at least she hoped he was. His letters, the shaky phone call from Chicago, and his promise, "I'm trying," still echoed in her mind. But was he truly ready to change, or was she stepping back into another painful cycle? Have you ever given someone a second chance? What made you decide to do so? Share in the comments. What do you think James will do to prove he's changed? James stood at the airport gate, holding a bouquet of white roses, Aisha's favorite flower. He looked different, not because of his elegant gray suit or neatly combed brown hair, but because of the worried, earnest look in his green eyes. When he saw her, he stepped forward, then paused, unsure if he was allowed to hug her. "Aisha," he said, his voice hoarse. "You're back." She nodded, accepting the bouquet and inhaling its sweet fragrance. "Thank you, James. They're beautiful." On the drive home, they spoke about her flight, Chicago's weather, and James's work. But as they entered the penthouse, the familiar silence returned. Aisha looked at the luxurious living room, once the backdrop of so many lonely nights, and wondered if anything had truly changed. James broke the silence. "I've started therapy," he said, eyes on the floor. "Dr. Lee, a specialist in family trauma. I want to change Aisha. For you, for us." His words brought a flicker of warmth, but Aisha remained cautious. "I'm glad you're trying, James, but words aren't enough. I need to see you act." He nodded, his eyes sincere. "I know. I'll prove it." That night, James slept in their shared bedroom for the first time in 730 nights. He lay beside her without touching her, but his presence, the warmth of his body, offered Aisha a sliver of hope. James tried. He tried. He cooked dinner, though he clumsily burned the salmon. He asked about her journalism work, listening as she spoke about her latest article on social inequality. But the test came on a Friday evening after a stressful day at work. He came home with a tense face and a distant gaze. "Bad day," he muttered, heading toward his office, the place he had once used to hide from her for hundreds of nights. Aisha stood in the hallway, her heart tightening. The old habit was returning like a ghost. "James," she called, her voice firm yet gentle. He stopped, hand-gripping the doorknob. "Don't go in there. Stay with me." He turned around, his eyes flickering between exhaustion and guilt. "I just need to handle a few things," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. She stepped forward, took his hand, and pulled him away from the door. "No, James. We said we'd face things together. Remember? Tell me what happened." He looked at her as if wrestling with himself. Then he sighed and sat on the sofa, head bowed. "A major deal fell through. I worked on it for a month, and the client pulled out. I feel like a failure, Aisha. And when I fail, I remember my father, how he took it out on my mother whenever things didn't go his way." Aisha sat beside him, her hand still holding his. "You're not your father, James. But if you hide in that office, you're letting that fear win. Stay here. Let me help you." He looked at her, his gaze softening. "You're right," he said, his voice low but firm. I almost did what I always do. Run. Thank you for stopping me. They sat on the sofa that night, and James talked about his latest therapy session. He shared a painful memory. When he was 12, he tried to stop his father from hitting his mother, but was shoved and hit his head on a table. I thought if I had been stronger, maybe Mom wouldn't have suffered, he said, voice choking with emotion. Aisha held him for the first time in years. You can't change the past, James, but you are changing the present. That's what matters. As they went to bed, James held her hand in the dark. I'm still scared, Aisha, he whispered. Scared I'm not good enough for you. She squeezed his hand. Being scared is okay, as long as you don't let it stop you from trying. Aisha closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand, knowing they were taking a small but vital step forward. Yet inside her, a question still lingered. Could James keep his promise, or would the next challenge break them again? Aisha Thompson was chopping vegetables in the penthouse kitchen, the aroma of sautéed garlic filling the air, when James Carter's phone rang from the living room. She could hear his low and tense voice through the thin wall. No, Dad, he said, voice sharp and cold. I told you I'm not sending money anymore. Aisha's heart sank. James's father, a ghost from the past, had returned, bringing with him the violent memories James was trying so hard to overcome. Would he stand firm this time, or would fear to drag him back into the darkness? Have you ever had to deal with a relative who disrupted your life? How did it feel? Share your story in the comments. How do you think James should handle his father? Aisha set down the knife and quietly stepped toward the kitchen doorway, watching James. He stood by the window, gripping his phone tightly, his face rigid. I don't care, he continued, voice rising. That's not my problem anymore. The call lasted a few more minutes, with James growing increasingly agitated until he abruptly hung up and began pacing the room, fists clenched. She stepped in, her voice gentle but firm. James, what happened? He stopped and turned to her, eyes filled with both anger and pain. My father, he said, his voice shaking. He wants $20,000 to pay off his gambling debts. He says he'll lose his apartment if I don't help. Aisha walked over and placed her hand on his shoulder. What did you tell him? I told him no, James replied, but his eyes wavered. I've been saying no for 3 years, but he keeps calling back. Aisha could feel the storm inside him, the tug of war between guilt and determination. She remembered the letters James had written, describing his fear of becoming his father, the man who used to beat his mother in drunken rages. She also remembered what he had shared in therapy, how at 12 years old, he had been shoved by his father and hit his head on a table while trying to protect his mom. You're doing the right thing, she said, gently squeezing his shoulder. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. James looked at her, his eyes softening but still filled with pain. Really? Because right now I feel like a terrible son. He sank onto the sofa, head bowed. When I was a kid, there was a night my dad got drunk and set part of the shed on fire. My mom was crying, begging him to stop, and he just laughed. I stood there, Aisha only 10 years old, thinking if I were stronger, I could stop him. Now he calls, and I feel just as helpless. His words cut into Aisha like a knife. She sat beside him, taking his hand. James, you're not responsible for your father. What he did wasn't your fault. She paused, then shared a memory of her own. Did you know my grandfather was an alcoholic too? He used to smash things when he was drunk, and my mom would hide Maya and me at the neighbor's house. I used to think if I behaved better, maybe he'd stop. But that's not how it works. Adults make their own choices, and we can't fix them. James looked at her, his eyes filled with understanding for the first time. You never told me that, he said. I didn't want you to think I was weak, Aisha replied, smiling sadly. But I've learned we can't live forever in someone else's past. You must let it go, James, so we can live in the present." He nodded, though Aisha could see the tension still clinging to him. "I want to go into the office," he admitted quietly. "Just to forget all this." Her heart tightened. The old escape route was peeking through, but she kept her voice calm. "No, James. Don't run. Stay here with me. We'll get through this together." He looked at her torn, then sighed. "You're right. I don't want to go back to who I used to be, but it's so hard, Aisha." She pulled him into a hug, feeling his body slowly relax. "I know," she whispered, "but you're not alone anymore." They sat there in the dim light of the living room, talking about his father and the scars he had left. James shared another memory when he was 15. He saw his mother packing her things to leave, leaving him behind with his father. "I thought she left because I wasn't strong enough to protect her," he said, voice choked. Aisha squeezed his hand. "She left because she had to save herself. And now you're doing the same, saving yourself and us." That night, James stayed with Aisha, instead of retreating into his office. They cooked dinner together, even though the beef turned out burnt. As they laughed over their culinary failure, Aisha felt a flicker of light. Not that everything was fixed, but that they were learning how to face things together. Still, she knew James's father wouldn't let go easily, and greater challenges lay ahead. She looked at James, wondering if he had the strength to keep going, or if the ghosts of the past would drag him back once more. The backyard of Aisha Thompson and James Carter's penthouse glowed in the sunset white rose bushes, swaying gently in the orange-gold light. A floral arch had been set up, glowing with candlelight, ready for their vow renewal ceremony, a new promise after years of pain and healing. Aisha stood in front of the mirror wearing a simple white dress, her heart pounding. Today she and James would pledge to each other again, not just for love, but for the courage that had brought them this far. But would that promise be strong enough to hold them forever? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment of new beginnings? What made it special? Share in the comments. What do you think Aisha and James's vows will sound like? Aisha took a deep breath, smoothing her natural curls, her brown skin glowing under the soft light. Her sister Maya, acting as both hairstylist and confidant, smiled at her through the mirror. "You look as beautiful as you did on your first wedding day," Maya said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "But this time you're so much stronger." Aisha nodded, remembering the lonely nights, James's painful letters, and the call from his father just a week ago, when James nearly got pulled back into the darkness of his past. Today wasn't just a ceremony, it was proof of the journey they'd survived. In the garden, guests had gathered, Aisha's mother, Grace, watching proudly, James's mother, Ellen, who rarely left Oregon, but had flown in to witness this day, and Dr. Lee, the trauma therapist, who had helped James confront the scars left by his father. Ella and Noah, Aisha's niece and nephew, ran through the flowers, their laughter brightening the solemn air. James stood beneath the arch, wearing a deep navy suit, his green eyes filled with nerves, but burning with resolve. When Aisha walked out, he looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time, as if she were his entire world. Reverend Linda, a minister specializing in vow renewals, began the ceremony warmly. "Today, Aisha and James choose to love each other again," she said. "Not because they never stopped, but because they've learned to love more deeply through trials and pain." Aisha felt tears well up, but she smiled, taking James's hand. He squeezed hers tightly, as if afraid to let go. When it was time for their vows, James went first. He cleared his throat, his eyes locked on Aisha. "Aisha, 3 years ago, I promised to love you forever. Back then, I thought love was a feeling. But you taught me love is a choice. I choose you, even when I'm afraid of becoming my father, who destroyed our family with his anger. I remember being 12, getting shoved by him when I tried to protect my mom. I've always feared that rage lived in me. But you, Aisha, you make me want to be better. I promise to speak, and let you help me no matter how hard it gets. You are my light, and I will choose you every day. James's voice cracked at the final words, tears rolling down his face. Aisha felt her heart melt, but she steadied herself for her vow. James, she began, her voice trembling, but clear. I used to think love meant never giving up. But I've learned that love also means demanding what you deserve. I used to feel lost in your world, the stares at company parties, your family's silence when I entered the room. But you've learned to stand for me, for us. I promise to love you even when you're scared, but also to love myself enough to speak up when I need you. I promise to choose hope over fear and build a life where we are both delighted. James pulled her into a tight embrace as Aisha finished, and the two cried in each other's arms. Standing among the guests, Dr. Lee smiled and shared a short story. I once helped a couple afraid of divorce, she said. They learned that love isn't about being perfect. It's about repairing the broken pieces together. Aisha and James, you are doing just that. Reverend Linda declared them husband and wife again, and James kissed Aisha a deep kiss full of love and promise. Applause erupted. Ella and Noah cheered, and Aisha's mother wiped away tears. As they walked out from under the arch, Aisha felt a new kind of strength. Not just love, but the belief that they could face anything, as long as they faced it together. But as the candlelight flickered in the garden, Aisha looked at James and knew their journey was far from over. The ghosts of his past, his father's societal pressure, racial prejudice, could still return. She gripped his hand tighter, wondering if they could hold on to these vows when the next storm came. A month after their vow renewal, Aisha Thompson stood in the kitchen of their penthouse, sunlight spilling over the marble countertop as she made coffee. The vows she and James Carter had exchanged beneath the white rose arch still echoed in her heart. But lately he had grown distant, not like before, but just enough to make her chest tighten. James came home late, his green eyes tired, and their conversations had grown shorter. Was the light they'd found in that garden fading, or was this simply another test they were meant to face? Have you ever felt a relationship that seemed fine start to drift again? What helped you hold on? Share in the comments. What do you think Aisha and James should do to hold on to their love? She heard the door open, and James walked in. His gray suit, wrinkled, a rare sight for a man usually so polished. Rough day, she asked, keeping her voice soft. He nodded and mumbled, too rough, then headed straight to the couch, phone in hand. No greeting, no hug, not even a glance. Aisha tightened her grip on the coffee mug, that familiar sting of loneliness rising. She thought of James's letters, where he promised to choose her every day, but now it felt like he was sliding back into the same darkness. For 3 straight days, James kept his distance. He worked late into the night, answered her questions with one-word replies, and avoided her eyes. Aisha tried to be patient, reminding herself he was still in therapy with Dr. Lee, and had changed. But fear crept in. Was he retreating again, like when his father called begging for money last month? She remembered last year's company party, when a colleague gave her a judgmental stare, and James had said nothing. Was he going silent again? Not just with her, but with himself. By the 4th night, Aisha couldn't take it anymore. She sat across James on the couch and placed her hand on his. James, we need to talk. He looked up, eyes weary but guarded. About what? About you, she said firmly. About how you're pulling away again. I thought we were past this. You promised to stay and talk to me. But what are you doing now? Avoiding me like before. James sighed, running a hand through his tousled brown hair. I'm not avoiding you, Aisha. It's just, work's been insane. A major project's falling apart, and I'm trying to fix it. She shook her head, eyes burning. Don't blame work, James. I know you're under pressure, but you're shutting me out. And if you don't tell me what's happening, how can I help you? He looked at her, guilt and fear flickering in his eyes. I didn't want to worry you, he said quietly. But I'm scared. Scared I'm not good enough. Scared I'll fail you, like I'm failing this project. His words softened her, but she didn't back down. James, I need honesty. If you're afraid, let me know. We vowed to face things together. He paused, then nodded. You're right. I need help. I think we should do therapy together. Aisha blinked in surprise, then nodded. Okay, I'll go with you. Their joint session with Dr. Lee took place that weekend. In the cozy, softly lit office, Aisha and James sat facing each other, while Dr. Lee observed with warm but sharp eyes. James, she began, why do you need to distance yourself from Aisha when work pressure increases? James looked down, fingers clasped tightly. When things get messy, I feel useless, he said. Like when I was a kid, powerless against my father. If Aisha sees me like that, I'm scared she'll leave just like my mom did. Aisha's heart clenched. She remembered the memory James had once shared, how at 15, he'd watched his mother pack up and leave him behind with his violent father. James, she said, taking his hand, I'm not your mother. I'm here because I want to be. But I need you to let me in, even when you're scared. He looked at her, eyes shimmering. I know, but it's hard, Aisha. I'm afraid I'm not the husband you deserve. Dr. Lee gently interjected. James, your fear is valid, but it doesn't define you. Aisha, can you share what's been hardest for you lately? Aisha took a deep breath. I felt isolated, she admitted. Like when I faced prejudice at James's company party. I've learned to stand up for myself, but when James pulls away, I'm afraid I'll disappear again in this marriage. James looked stunned. I didn't know you felt that way, he said softly. I'm sorry, Aisha. The session ended with a plan. James would share his stress instead of withdrawing. Aisha would speak up when she felt neglected. As they walked out, James held her hand tightly. Thank you for not giving up, he said. Aisha smiled, but worry still lingered. They had overcome this hurdle, but she knew other pressures, his job, family, society's judgment still loomed. She looked at him, wondering, are we strong enough to keep going? Aisha Thompson sat in the penthouse living room with afternoon light streaming through the windows and illuminating the pages across the coffee table. Besides her, James Carter reviewed a chapter with a red pen marking notes in the margins. 6 months after their vow renewal, they had co-written a book, not just about love, but about how they overcame fear, prejudice, and the scars of the past. The book, Choosing Love Through Fear, had just become a bestseller, but the letters from readers made Aisha's heart race, sharing how their story had saved other marriages. Could their journey change the world? Have you ever read a book or heard a story that changed how you see life? What was it? Share in the comments. How do you think Aisha and James's story might inspire others? Aisha held a letter from a couple in Atlanta, her voice trembling as she read it aloud to James. Thank you for sharing about fear and prejudice in interracial marriage, the letter said. We're also a black and white couple, and we nearly divorced due to pressure from family. Your book gave us hope, and now we're in therapy together." James paused his writing, his green eyes lighting up with emotion. "They're just like us," he said quietly. "I never imagined our story could touch someone like that." Writing the book hadn't been easy. Aisha and James had to dive deep into their most painful memories. Her lonely nights, his fear of becoming his father, the man who shattered a liquor bottle in front of him at just 8 years old. They wrote about the company party where Aisha endured prejudice, and James's silence wounded her. They wrote about James's father calling to demand money just a month before, and how they got through it by supporting each other. Each chapter was a confrontation with the past, and a reaffirmation of their love. The book wasn't just about them, it was about greater lessons. How communication can save a relationship, how to overcome racial prejudice in marriage, and how to choose love, even in fear. An article in Time magazine called them "The Couple Who Confronted Fear and Prejudice," featuring a photo of Aisha and James holding hands in the garden, where they renewed their vows. The article emphasized how they faced societal pressure from James's conservative family to whispered judgments at corporate events and turned it into strength. One evening, Aisha received an email from a reader in Seattle, a black woman who had divorced, but was considering giving her ex-husband another chance. "Reading how you were patient with James, but also demanded what you deserved, made me want to try again," she wrote. Aisha cried as she read the message and hugged James tightly. "We're helping people, James," she said. "Not just us, thousands of people." He kissed her forehead and whispered, "All because of you, Aisha. You saved us, and now you're saving them too." James shared a letter from a man in Texas who had also grown up with a violent father, reading about your therapy and how you stopped letting the past define you. "I booked my first session," the man wrote. James read the letter with a choked voice, remembering that painful moment at age 15 when his mother left him with his alcoholic father. "I used to think I was broken," he told Aisha. "But if I can help someone else feel like they're not broken, then every bit of pain was worth it." The impact of the book exceeded anything they had imagined. They were invited to speak on talk shows where Aisha discussed facing racial prejudice, like the condescending stares at James's company party, and how James had learned to stand up for her. James spoke about therapy with Dr. Lee and how he'd learned to release his fear of becoming his father. A mental health nonprofit invited them to speak, and the letters kept coming, each one a testament to the power of their story. But amid the joy, Aisha felt a new pressure. Sharing their story with the world brought anxiety. What if they failed again? She remembered their therapy session last month, where James admitted his fear of failure, and she opened up about feeling invisible. They'd gotten through it, but she knew public pressure and lingering shadows like James's father could return. She looked at James now, smiling, as he read another letter, and wondered, do we have the strength to keep being an inspiration, not just for others, but for ourselves? Autumn sunlight filtered through the windows, casting a golden glow over the backyard garden of the penthouse, where Aisha Thompson and James Carter sat on a bench hand in hand. Their book, Choosing Love Through Fear, became a bestseller, spreading their story of love and healing to thousands. But today, in the quiet of their garden, James looked at Aisha with a different gaze, not just one of love, but of deep resolve. "Aisha," he said, voice soft but steady, "I think we're ready to have a child." His words swept over her like a warm wind, making her heart flutter. Were they truly ready for this life-changing step? Have you ever faced a life-altering decision like starting a family? What made you feel ready or afraid? Share in the comments. What do you think Aisha and James will feel about this choice? Aisha tightened her grip on James's hand, her deep brown eyes searching his green ones. A child, she repeated, her voice trembling. They had once dreamed about it back when they first married, imagining a house filled with children's laughter. But then came years of distance letters, filled with James's fears and challenges, like his father's relentless calls. That dream had been shelved. Now, after renewing their vows and the success of their book, James was bringing it back. But why now? James nodded, his hands subtly shaking. I know it sounds sudden, but I've been thinking about it for a long time. We've come so far through my fears, society's judgment, and pressure from my family. I used to be terrified of becoming a father, terrified I'd become like my dad, who destroyed everything with his rage. He paused, eyes distant, recalling the memory of his father smashing a liquor bottle in front of him at age 8 and of his mother leaving when he was 15. But you, Aisha, and Dr. Lee, you helped me see that I can choose to be different. I want to be a father, your child's father. Tears welled quietly in Aisha's eyes. She remembered her lonely nights in the penthouse, wondering if she'd ever become a mother. She remembered the weight of judgment, those cold stares at James's company parties, the whispers that she didn't belong in his world. But James had changed. She thought of his recent interview, where he publicly condemned the racial bias directed at her. Are you sure, James? She asked gently. Having a child is a huge change. Are you ready to face that, and all the fears that might come with it? He smiled, a genuine but nervous smile. I'm not saying I'm not afraid. I still am afraid I won't be good enough. Afraid of how harsh the world can be, especially for a child of both our worlds. But I believe in us, Aisha. We've learned how to face fear. And I want to build a family with you. A family filled with love. Not like the one I grew up in. His words struck deep. Aisha thought of her sister Maya, who raised Ella and Noah unconditionally, despite all odds. She thought of her mother Grace, who raised her and Maya in a neighborhood steeped in prejudice, but taught them to be proud of their brown skin. I want that too, James, she said, her voice now firm. I want to be a mother. I want our child to grow up knowing that love is a choice, the same way we chose each other. But we have to be honest. If you're scared, say it. If I'm anxious, I'll tell you too. James pulled her into a hug, whispering into her curls. I promise. We'll do this together. They sat in the garden, dreaming about baby names, colorful nurseries, and how they would teach their child about courage and love. But Aisha couldn't ignore the quiet worry still lingering. Parenthood would bring new trials, especially in a world still full of bias toward interracial families like theirs. 6 months later, Aisha stood in the bathroom, her hand trembling as she held the pregnancy test. 2 lines, clear and unmistakable. She called out, her voice choked. James, come here. He rushed in, eyes wide with concern, then froze when he saw the test. We're having a baby, he asked, voice cracking. Aisha nodded, tears streaming down her face. James wrapped his arms around her tightly, both laughing and crying. We've got this, Aisha, he said. Our child is going to be something beautiful. That night, they lay in bed, Aisha's hand resting gently on her still flat belly. James talked to their baby, telling them about his day, his voice soft and proud. Aisha smiled, but her thoughts turned toward the future. She remembered last month's therapy session, James admitting his fear of failure, and her sharing what it felt like to feel invisible in the face of bias. They had overcome it, but parenthood would require even more, not just love, but strength against the scrutiny, the whispered judgments about their child. She looked at James, knowing they would have to be stronger than ever, but she believed they could be because they had chosen each other. And now they were choosing their child. The backyard of the Los Angeles penthouse sparkled with fairy lights and white roses, as Aisha Thompson and James Carter celebrated their 5th wedding anniversary. Beneath the starry sky, Aisha, 8 weeks pregnant, stood beside James, his hand gently resting on her waist. Their book, Choosing Love Through Fear, inspired thousands. But tonight, surrounded by family and friends, they celebrated something even more precious, a love that had survived prejudice, fear, and lonely nights. As James raised his glass for a toast, Aisha felt a deep, perfect peace. Yet she wondered, was this the end of their journey, or just the beginning of a new one? How did Aisha and James's love story make you feel? What was your favorite moment in their journey? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how this ending touched you. Guests gathered in the glowing garden. Maya with Ella and Noah. Aisha's mother, Grace. James's mother, Ellen, and Dr. Lee, who had guided them through the scars of the past. Laughter and soft music filled the air. But the spotlight was on James, standing atop a small platform, with a glass of wine that caught the light. 5 years ago, he began, his green eyes locked onto Aisha's. I married the most incredible woman in the world, but I almost lost her. Because of fear. Fear of becoming my father, the man who destroyed our family with his anger. His voice trembled slightly as he recounted the painful memories, witnessing his father shatter a liquor bottle at age 8 and watching his mother walk out at 15. I used to think love was dangerous, he continued. But Aisha taught me love is a choice. She was patient even when I ran like the nights I slept at the office. She was brave, facing judgment at company galas, where people whispered that she didn't belong. Aisha saved our marriage by being strong enough to walk away. I'm here today because of her. Tears welled in Aisha's eyes, but she smiled, her hand resting on the place where their child was growing. James's voice grew stronger. You taught me love isn't perfect. It's choosing each other daily, even when it's hard. Because of you, I went to therapy. I faced my father. I learned to love without fear. And because of you, I want to be the kind of father our child deserves. Applause broke out, and Ella and Noah cheered, but all Aisha could see was James, who had become everything she once dreamed of. She stepped onto the platform and wrapped her arms around him, whispering, I love you, James. He kissed her forehead and replied, Thank you for not giving up on me. Maya stood and raised her glass. To Aisha and James, she said, who proved that love can heal even the deepest wounds. Everyone toasted, and Grace. Aisha's mother wiped away a tear, whispering to her, You've made me so proud, my daughter. Dr. Lee also shared a brief story. I once worked with a couple who thought they couldn't go on, she said. But like Aisha and James, they learned to choose each other. Your story proves that love is a journey, not a destination. Aisha looked at James and thought back to all they'd overcome, the fear-filled letters, the phone calls from his father, the therapy sessions where James confessed to feeling worthless. They had survived it all, and now they stood here ready to welcome a child. During the party, someone read aloud a letter from a reader in New York, a couple on the brink of divorce who began therapy after reading Choosing Love Through Fear. Thank you for giving us hope, the letter read. Aisha squeezed James's hand, joy spreading through her. The book hadn't just saved them, it was saving others, especially interracial couples facing the same prejudice they once encountered at corporate events and from James's conservative family. As guests began to leave, Aisha and James remained in the garden beneath the stars. We're going to be okay, right? She asked, her hand still resting on her belly. James kissed her gently, his voice sure. We're going to be more than okay, Aisha. We will be happy, you, me, and our baby. She smiled, thinking back on their journey from lonely nights when she once called a divorce lawyer to the vow renewal ceremony and the dream of building a family. They had chosen to love through fear, through judgment, through every trial. and now they were choosing the future. Aisha gazed up at the sky, feeling a peace she had never known. 5 years ago, they were strangers in the same house. Now they were partners, lovers, and future parents, building a world where their child would grow up with love and pride in both heritages. "Thank you for choosing me," she said. James smiled and replied, "Thank you for choosing me forever and always." Thank you for following Aisha and James's journey. If you love this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your favorite moment in the comments. What story would you like us to tell next? Let us know.